This is an older match from about 14 years ago. I was a brown belt at the time, a few months before I got my black belt. If I look at this fight back, I don't think I live up to the standards of what I consider a black belt or a brown belt these days. These were different times, and it's very interesting to see how the overall level of the game and how my level has evolved in those years. I pretty much have the same game today as I did back then, only more evolved, less mistakes and more stable on top. Enjoy the match, look at the amount of scrambles, and also notice a less evolved version of my back defense. I was always comfortable in showing my back and using it as a means for offense, mostly getting into sweeps. I started to develop this years before it got more mainstream and fancy. In this match you will also see that I use a lot of forward pressure and always like to stay close. You have to understand how my game developed. I used to be an MMA fighter first and grappler second. In an MMA setting you always like to stay close to minimize damage and prevent your opponent from getting back up. On the downside, you expose yourself more to armbars, guillotines, triangles and omoplatas. That also explains why I developed a good defense against those attacks. And I learned to pass from there. Here you can see the early beginning of that, where I tried to do a stack pass from close guard. I get countered, but we reset back to the middle without getting swept. I always preferred a hunched over, low posture and looking for inside space, as it is the main ways to keep your opponent down and defense against strikes. Here you see my stack pass backfire, flip up to my turtle initially, and right away the guy starts attacking my back. And here look, because my two arms are underneath, he cannot score, and I can use this to wrestle back up to my knees. Most people there think back defense, I'm already thinking there, I'm trying to pass his guard. Just with my back forward. Recently I started watching an instructional of Eduardo Telles, the Turtle Master, and I noticed that many of the things I do are very similar. I probably could have skipped years of training and developing myself if I had access to those instructionals early. I never watched matches or instructionals of Telles until recent years, but I just knew about this one eccentric guy who kept showing his back and fight from turtle and was successful competing from there. This inspired me and made me believe it was possible, and it led me to develop much of the same things that are a staple in Telles' game. The mistakes I make here are mostly tightness and stability. I didn't do a lot of strength training or not a very good strength program in those days, so it also explains why I might not be strong enough to keep the positions here. Looking at this moment right now here, this is a wrestle up I will 9 out of 10 win. Actually I did win it, get to the back. And well, this moment is very painful for me to watch because I really suffer to get my both feet inside. Trying to get the foot there inside gives a lot of space, so now my opponent can scoop his hip away back and it becomes even harder to get my hooks inside. I now realize that the way to get the back is actually to keep hip attachment instead of shoulder attachment. And there, by stepping over, I actually stop controlling my opponent's rotation. This is a big mistake in back attacks and what I always warn my students about. It becomes impossible to keep your chest attached to the back if you don't control the rotation. And luckily my half guard was always there to save me, the low single. Here these days I would drop my right hip to the floor to walk back to the leg first. However, I stand up and we walk out of the mat and now it's a reset. This teaches you something else. It's always very important when you wrestle in matches and when you sweep that you know when your opponent runs out of the mat, it's usually a reset back in the middle. If it's started on the ground, you have a chance to keep your guard and reset in the middle, but very often in the middle of a scramble you have to start from scratch. So very important to understand distance control and mat dominance, space control whenever you fight a match. I don't know what happened on this moment. I think maybe the time ran out and then they do overtime starting from one person on the bottom and one person on top because it was filler wrestling, and I think it's based on the how they start in wrestling also with referee position whenever there is no points after the time finishes up. So let's see what happens. A bit different rules and a bit of confusion because for both of us we never experienced this. So one person starts on his back, one person on top, control of the both knees and then start. This moment is very painful to watch for me. I get swept like a pancake right away. Huge mistake. And now 1 point behind in overtime with minutes to go before the fight ends. That is something I really pride myself upon though. And that is, I never ever break mentally. I always keep fighting till the very last second. Now it's just 1 point and the match is still winnable. But I could be 20 points behind, 30 points behind and 10 seconds to go. I don't care. I will fight till the very last second. I also credit my MMA experience for that. If you get punched in your face, well, you can always stop and give up, or you keep fighting and scrambling till the very end so you minimize damage and still have a chance to win. Why is it important to never break? Well, if you always break in hard moments, then what is a hard moment? Something you consider hard at some point might be easy in the future. So never break, and your definition of what is hard will also change, and you will always push on through other areas in life as well. It's also a good example for your students or other people who watch your fights. There are more reasons why you keep fighting till the very end. Sometimes your teammate has to fight after you, so it's good that you make your opponent tired so your teammate has an easier match. Your opponent also has to remember you. If he remembers you, even if you won, if he remembers you as a very tough opponent, he will be less happy next time to fight you again. Here you see me pushing through and still win the fight. I credit my MMA experience to the fact that I never break. If you get punched in an MMA fight, you can always stop and give up, but then you get also damaged right before that. So you push through, even if you get punched, you scramble to get to a safe spot or at the very least minimize damage. In my head, there is only 4 ways a fight ends. You either win by submission, you win by points, but you tried everything in the last seconds to get to the submission, you lose by submission, or you lose by points. But when you lose by points, you better give everything that you almost have to puke when you leave the mat. That is just the way I see these things. Anyway, I won this fight. Let me know in the comments what you think and if you see the development of my game.